We're so excited here because we have today Mr. Dave Taylor is gracing us with his presence. He's one of the world's most prominent bass trombonists and one of the first few known as a jazz bass trombonist. He's a faculty at Manhattan School of Music. I'm sorry, one of the only schools in the country and the world that holds a faculty position for jazz bass trombone. All of this makes sense considering his long resume of work with groups such as Stokowski, American Symphony Orchestra, the New York Philharmonic under Pierre Boulez, the Thad Jones Mel Lewis Orchestra, also known as Vanguard Jazz Orchestra. He's recorded with Duke Ellington for the New Orleans Suite, Gil Evans, George Russell, George Grunt's Concert Jazz Band, Chuck Israel, the Rolling Stones, Barbra Streisand, Miles Davis, Quincy Jones, Frank Sinatra, Aretha Franklin, Blood, Sweat, and Tears, and there's plenty more. He also has done extensive work as a soloist, appearing as a soloist at the St. Luke's Chamber Orchestra, the Chamber Music Society of Lincoln Center, the Caramore Festival Orchestra, the New York Chamber Symphony, the Basel Sinfonietta, the Adelaide Philharmonic, and the Group for Contemporary Music, among others.
Yeah, and not only is he a prominent voice in bass trombone, but also as a composer. He's been involved in dozens of commissioning projects for the bass trombone in solo and chamber idioms. You can find out more about his collaborations with composers and his discography on his website. We're also going to be showing and discussing excerpts of specific pieces during the stream. And his website is davetaylor.net, and you can find out information about his expansive resume and buy his records, as well as listen to them on Spotify, YouTube, and Apple Music. Let's get started with this first excerpt. So we're starting with bass trombone standard rep. Everybody knows this Sub-Zero third movement, so let's have a listen. Amazing. Sensational playing.
That's right. Yeah. So,
did you like?
Yeah. So, I guess one thing that came right to mind are the questions that we have a bunch of questions written out for you today. But the first thing that came to mind is like just the playing is so virtuosic, and you make it seem like every like technical passage or easy passage just sounds effortless.
Thank
So, is there any chance you could talk just a little bit about your mindset when you're playing something that shouldn't be possible on the bass trombone?
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't think anything's impossible playing a bass trombone. But I developed a technique when I was in my early 20s because I was an orchestral player mainly while I was at Juilliard, and then just ventured into the, that's a whole story, into the jazz scene. I had to change my articulation. So by the time I was in my mid-20s, I only had two spots in my mouth that I put my tongue. I practice that way all the time. It's either on the top teeth, back of the top teeth, meaty part, or I don't ever let my tongue go through my lips. I let it drop down just to hit the top lip. And that's everything I do. So everything I do is either like a soft legato or a hard legato, or every now and then if I have to, like a marcato thing. But I just apply that and practice,
Yeah.
I practice scales like a couple hours every day,
Oh, nice. Can you talk a little bit about your work with Daniel Schnyder? Because you have this is not the only piece that you guys have done.
Daniel, we've done 5 to 7 CDs together. He's written me a sonata, two concerti. He's written me a whole duo repertoire, and that's all recorded. That's online too. And we met, he's Swiss, and I used to play in a band called the George Gruntz Band, and he heard me playing in Zurich. We were playing in an airplane hinder, and I was doing. George would write these whole epic pieces for me to improvise on, and to invent poetry and stuff like that. And Daniel came up to me the next day at a restaurant. We were sitting out drinking at a restaurant. And usually I push guys away like that, but for some reason I didn't push him away. And he said, "Hey, look, why don't we get together and play? I'm moving to New York. I'd love to start a trio with you." And we did. Kenny Drew Jr., the great pianist, Kenny Drew Jr., and Daniel and I. And so we developed a whole trio repertoire. And then we became very, very good friends. So I know him for 30 years. We know each other's families and stuff like that. So it's just natural, you know. Yeah. And he trusted me. And we have a compatibility because we both are multi-genre, and we apply that to all the playing. It's kind of using I hate the word jazz and classical, but it's improvisatory technique combined with through composed technique, and we treat time like it's a children's playground. You know what I mean? It's not like it's not that, you know. And then when I started playing in Thad Jones Band, man, I mean, that was my first introduction into non-metric big band time, really. This was a self-contained group, and they had been together a long, long time by the time I joined. That was in the early 70s. And I remember one anecdotal story, man, when we were in Barcelona, and I left the gig crying. We were playing on Willow Weep for Me. I literally left the gig crying, man, because, you know, I was so self-confident about various things. And I couldn't play 4/4 time the way that band was playing 4/4 time because it was idiosyncratic.
Yeah.
So I started checking that out real early, and Daniel and I both applied that, and blah blah blah.
That's amazing. I never thought about how you can use the influence of. You're saying Thad Jones really influenced the way that you perform.
Thad Jones, as far as I'm concerned, I was playing at the New York Philharmonic at the same time I was playing with Thad Jones.
Wow.
Pierre Boulez. Pierre Boulez was hip to me because he had a small group, counter series at Cooper Union in Manhattan. And then when he needed a sub, because my teacher was sick for a long period of time, I became the guy. So I was playing a Thad's band at the same time as the orchestra. And then I started playing with the Lincoln Center Chamber Music Society. And I think it was directly as a result of playing in Thad's band and recording with Duke, because those cats played across the bar. You know, we had rhythm section laying it down, especially Miller with that pocket. But you have and as improvisers, as you know, we don't play metrically. You know, we kind of floating over the thing. That's classical chamber music. And in fact, the closest thing to the improvisers that we know now in the 20th and 21st century were the Renaissance musicians, because those cats played without bar lines and they were blowing off the tunes of the day.
Yeah.
This is really not like a new thing. This is like a, you know, universal continuum, man. You know.
Yeah. That's amazing. Oh, we have a quick question here from the live stream. Xavier Gonzalez says, if you can you ask when the CD of him in a brass quintet playing all Ewald is coming out?
Yeah. Chris Comer, French horn player, Jim Albrecht, Mark Gould, Chris Gecker, and I recorded all the Ewald quintets about 8 years ago, and we just hemming and hawing, you know, arguing. Gould and I have been arguing with each other for 40 years, you know. So,
yeah.
You know, it's coming out soon. Don't hold your breath, but it's coming out soon. Better story.
Well, since you're talking about your jazz influence on the Schneider piece and how you think of it all, I think this is a great leeway going into your most recent album, if I'm not mistaken. The Dave Taylor plays the music of Dave Taylor, right? That's the most recent.
Taylor plays the music of David Taylor. Right?
Yes, David Taylor plays the music of David Taylor. So we have
no.
Dave Taylor.
Dave
Taylor. Right.
My bad. We have you on iTunes, because this is a record that's not on. It's not necessarily on
streaming platform.
Yeah,
so you have to buy it to listen to this.
I have no clue.
All right, so this is Concoctination. So this is Concoctination. This is track 2.
You want a story about that or no?
Yeah, actually, that would be great.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. So that piece is called Too Sweet. TOOSUIT, Too Sweet. And each movement, each of the 5 movements is based on the words from the poem that created Franz Schubert's song Die Nebensonne. But the concatenation movement is an improvisatory movement. It's about a bipolar personality because the Nebensonnen is about a guy contemplating suicide.
Wow.
We think, and we can have a lot of other reasons. The Mach sons, that means there's three suns, and there is a scientific actually word for three, that some kind of illusion, prismatic illusion, that the sun appears as three distinct things. But the lyrics here are ambiguous, and I've interpreted it, and many other people have interpreted it that way. And the opening movement of the 5-movement piece is called Hymn, that presents the situation. The second movement, the improvisatory movement, is his descent into madness. And the third movement, which you'll probably play later, called Dance, is because bipolar people don't just go like this, they go up and down. Yeah. The third movement is the dance, his elation. The fourth movement is me singing the Nebensonnen. And the fifth movement is a blues based on he doesn't know what's going down, and it ends on an open fifth. You know, it's like, which door is the lion behind? You know what I mean? You know that old Roman story about blah, blah. So go ahead. Great. Shall I talk about what I'm doing?
Here, let's play the track a little bit. Can you hear it?
Yep.
Can you hear me changing volume?
Yeah, I can hear, but let it go for a second because I'm using an electronic mute. Well, I'm blowing through a karaoke mic.
Yeah, yeah.
Can you tell us what you're saying in the back?
Say that again. Oh, yes. So I play in a band called
Yeah.
And the drummer is Kevin Kay. And Ron Smith is the piano player on this record. Ma Bailey is the bass player. I said to Kevin, man, go into the studio and let's just blow off each other.
Yeah.
Do your thing, go off. But he started going off talking about his mother, mommy, all kind of stuff. Which actually is really, it's funny how all this stuff comes, your head is in the right place. Somehow, everything kind of together. Really, when you think about the sense of madness and people being bipolar and stuff like that, a lot of that is developed in one's house growing up.
Yeah.
One's parents and with one's, of course, it's biological, but it's also environmental, you know? So, but anyway, play what comes after that. That's the dance comes right after that. Just give them a smattering of that so they understand that this doesn't go, it kind of does follow quickly into it.
Yeah. Okay. So this is the dance.
Right.
Yeah.
This one, and you do this a lot over several pieces that we're gonna talk about today. You just have like
Right.
such magnificent facility.
Uh, to me, it's just kind of a simplistic, yeah, G minor with a
Yeah.
third, you know, something.
Yeah. Yeah, I hear that for sure.
I was very shocked when I finished that in Alaska. Actually, I was in Juneau, Alaska. This is like the first long form piece I've ever written. It's that's not quite true. Long, yeah, I don't know. The first kind of through composed long form thing that I'd written, and I was very surprised how it came out. I was actually very happy with it, and I started getting some nice mention in newspapers about it. That's what I tried to do with my career, man. I've always I've never worried about the college scene. You know, I wanted to play in front of real audiences all the time. So that kind of shaped my
Yeah.
career.
And before we get on to the next track, because when I first listened to this, like the first time I listened through the record, I hadn't read the liner notes yet. So to me, it was like being kind of like you play a lot with like sheets of sound, kind of maybe is the word, and just like a soundscape, colors and different things. But if you go back and read the liner notes, you talk about like the tracks and what they mean, and like it gives so much more meaning because it's not just like the sound of it, but the intent and how you want like someone to feel. At least that's how I received it. You were talking about like anxiety and stress, and I definitely felt that when I got to like
Right.
second track. And I was like, you know, and it was like a feeling of discomfort.
Yeah, I'm not about happy talk all the time. You know, but it's interesting that you mentioned that, because in a piece I just played that's getting a lot of action, I call it Houdini's Lament. I premiered the piece 3 times at a place called Barge Music. I premiere a lot of my music there. And I didn't use the words, although I had the poem. I didn't use the words. I did it as a straight instrumental piece. But at any rate, so I put words to it, and the piece was written for words, I discovered. I mean, I write a lot of things, and all of a sudden the stuff comes to me after I write the piece, or I'm halfway into the piece. I'm kind of like into sounds, you know.
I saw a sea of faces looking upward from the street at a man who hung suspended from a rope that bound his feet. They were anxious. They were fearful. They were curious. They were glad. They were laughing. They were tearful. They were joyous. They were sad.
Is it improvising?
High above them, he was swinging with a jacket round and tied. He was wriggling. He was twisting as he tried to get outside.
Is there any way to skip towards the end of this?
Yeah.
Yeah. One thing that I noticed that's really cool about this piece in particular that you just got into is that you're using the Harmon sort of as a plunger. You're going
Yes, I
in
do
and out with
know.
the Harmon.
I do that a lot, actually. It's not easy on the bells.
Yeah. It gets a really cool, distinct sound.
Yeah, but I'm using a wild buzzer mute at some point. Go back. Yeah. Oh, there it is. I could try because I'm retarded. I kind
Yeah.
Yeah.
the piece became he's up there in the straitjacket, Houdini. He was a great escape artist. And the poet is talking about how all the people in the crowd, they're in straitjackets too. And we all try to get out of our straitjackets, try to get outside our errors, try to get outside our vanity, and try to become free people. And that's a constant quest, you know? Now, when the critic reviewed it without the words, it kind of bugged me because the critic talked about how I was describing the complexity of Houdini's life, but really I wasn't. So that convinced me to put the words in because taking it from a in this to an out everyone was more important to me, you know. The piece is actually virtuosic in certain places. We didn't necessarily hit those places, but
I think
and
we
the-
hit some of them.
oh, okay. And the buzzing mute, you'd be surprised how audiences love that. I mean, audiences just go wild over all the mutes. When a fellow wrote a piece for me, a solo piece where I'm improvising over a 100-piece orchestra on the Richard Strauss piece called Ein Heldenleben. He called it U-Held, and we did it in Austria a lot, but then the Strauss Foundation came down on us. But I had electronics going on around me. I had the Vienna Philharmonic Trombone Quartet accompanying me on the side, a 100-piece orchestra. And when you play in front of a symphony orchestra, a lot of times, you're the trombone player, that kind of a thing. So what I do is I nail the concertmaster right away at the beginning of rehearsal. I put a Harmon stem in it, and I try to play a duo with the concertmaster, and I berate him for playing too loud for the bass trombone. Because we're at Harmon stem in, that's very quiet,
Yeah.
But you'd be surprised how audiences respond to that. It's a very sexy thing. After you've blown your brains out, and all of a sudden this very low, ooh, ooh, sound comes in, very dramatic, and audiences respond. I'm not saying I write for audiences to respond, but I'm certainly aware that as artists, we are representatives of our generation.
Yeah.
We really don't want to leave the audience out of the picture. We don't want to pander to them, but we don't want to, we're aware of drama.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
We have a comment from Jen that she says that you create some mutes yourself.
Oh, hey, Jen. Yes, I do, actually. And even the Harmon mutes, I'm not going to tell you all the secrets, but the Harmon mutes, I modify the Harmon mutes. I find special plungers that are really big. My wife and I were on vacation in Paris once. We were at a fancy hotel, and I happened to see a porter running to somebody's room to kind of clean out the plumbing. And all I could think of was when I saw that plunger, I ran after this porter in this swanky hotel, and I found out where he got the plunger from, and we made an excursion in Paris to get the plunger. Buzzer mutes, I make my own buzzer mutes. If you want to play Thekla after this little conversation, that'd be cool too. I originally made the buzzing mute because in my first record, Pastels, I do a Charles Ives song that he called The Indians. And it's about how the white men sailed through the West, killing all the Indian children. So I had to figure out a way to describe death. And so I used a string quartet and a harpsichord, and me in this buzzing mute, very stark. And but then after I started playing it for a while, people started responding to it. It was like Ben Webstery kind of a funky sound, you know what I mean? A breathy kind of a sound. So I started putting it into everything that I want to describe emotion. And this next thing, this is a Franz Schubert piece on this record, right? And Thekla is a woman whose man has died, and they're communicating to each other through the ether. They're going beyond death. Their love is so strong. So this is how I dealt with it.
So we have, this track is going to be a little bit loud. So if you have headphones on, or if you have like really loud speakers, you might want to put it down a little bit.
And it's again a buzzing mute.
Can you hear?
that's the Great Washington Trombone Ensemble. I mean,
That
that's
sounds sensational.
they're fantastic, and led by Chris Brannigan. And what I heard there was an Ave Maria. This is Franz Schubert. I heard an Ave Maria, and I had to figure out a way to get surreal with the thing, and I had to figure out a way to deal with the melody, you know. So I'm not playing any non-melody notes. I'm not singing any non-melody notes. I just had to figure out a way to, you know, I'm married 52 years to a woman I love very deeply. So when you think of all these personal relationships, and you kind of imagine, oh God,
Yeah.
what's that going to be like if God forbid, you know, that kind of thing. And
Yeah.
you want to keep that communication going, and you know. But can you go through the first track, Hertz, for a second? Play that for a minute. So here, a guy made a track for me based on my sounds and everything that you're
There's a look of faces and bloods. Comes to a child and touches it. Comes to a child and touches it. It comes like a bird never seen. Goes like a bird never handled. They're a little mother. Hear the bird, hear the bird, hear the bird, hear the bird. They're a little mother. I hear the bird, hear the bird, hear the bird, hear the bird. There's a look of faces and bloods. Comes to a child and touches it. It comes like a bird never seen. Never seen. Never seen. Never seen. Goes like a bird never handled. Mother.
Okay, so now, if you go to the very last Hertz number 2 at the end of the record, it's the same track. The guy took my sounds and just made a soundscape out of it. So everything I did over it was improvised, except the words were from Carl Sandburg, great American poet from the early part of the 20th century. And this is how I handle it on the outside. And after I heard it, it kind of sounds like Tony Bennett to me.
I love you, said the great mother. I love you for what you are, and I love you more yet, child, deeper yet than ever, child, for what you are going to be, yonder and far over yet, yonder and far over yet, ahead and beyond, yonder and far over yet, deeper than ever, child, knowing so well you are going far, knowing your great works are ahead, yonder and far over yet, yonder and far over yet. Yonder and far over yet.
Basically, 2 weeks after 9/11, I had to meet Daniel Schnieder in Zurich for a gig. And so I used to double book myself because I couldn't afford to play concerts and stuff of my music without having a gig to back it up. You know, people weren't paying me, that kind of stuff like that. So, but I was able to book I get paid for all the records I did except for the last 1 or 2. So I double booked on the way to Daniel Schnieder's gig. I booked a recording session of a solo album, me unaccompanied, which this was part, that I used it on this next record. I got permission, of course. But I recorded a whole CD in one evening. And this was part of that thing. I knew I wanted to use a Carl Sandburg tune because he's dealing with mothers and children and birds on fire. So it was, the whole record was that whole record, Hymns, Hums, Hiss, and Hertz, was a whole dedication to the firemen. But I don't want to talk about my politics on my CDs, because if people get involved in hearing what your politics are on your CDs, they listen for the politics. Mm-hmm. I'd rather they hear the music, groove on the music, whatever the hell, and then, all right, if you want to get the background, fine. you know. So this was part of it. So what I do is I have one microphone overhead, one microphone in front, and I have my mute stand next to me, and I'm either singing up, playing down, singing up, playing down, and that's how I don't overdub those things, you know. So it's a lot of fun for me to do it, you know. So I did the whole CD, it's an hour CD in one evening, and then we kind of mixed it the next morning, and I headed off to Zurich, you know, and this was about 2001, I think, right? That was 2001. So, and then usually I forget what I do and I go on to the next thing, you know.
Yeah.
And nobody really, no, I shouldn't be so self-deprecatory, but nobody really buys this stuff, you know. But I kind of love doing it, and because I was kind of well known in the studios and the freelance thing, I always had finances coming in.
Yeah.
So I had total free, although I did get paid quite a bit of sum for that one. But when I do these aesthetic projects, you know, for me, it's a whole thing. My whole career was really kind of based on who loved me the most. You know, it's like when I came out of Juilliard, I mean, I was playing both in big bands and I actually had a gig, a steady orchestra gig with Leopold Stokowski at Carnegie Hall while I was going to Juilliard last year. So when I got to Juilliard, I couldn't read music very well. I was a tuba player in junior high school and high school, but my mother couldn't get me home with the tuba because we lived far away. So my kid brother played the trombone. So when I was senior in high school, I took up a trombone. And when I got to Juilliard, I really couldn't read that well. They wouldn't let me in any chamber music classes or orchestras or anything. They wouldn't even let me into a theory class because I had to take rudimentary theory. But I guess they liked my sound. And I think back in the day, it was a little looser how you got into school, you know? So that was really a boon because what I had to do is I went out on the street and I couldn't do any things in school. So I did all the community orchestras and all the big bands. You know, I never thought about jazz or classical music, you know. So so I was networking while I was going to school. I didn't even know I was networking, you know, that kind of a thing. And I recommend that to everybody, incidentally, because those who stay in the building will stay in the building, you know. So I just went where I was loved. Some years it was more classical music. Some years it was more jazz music. I hate those terms, but some years it was more that. Some years it was more this. I was never smart enough to develop a kind of a style at first in the big bands. My style was my sound. I want to be heard. That's my style. I want to be heard, and I want to be heard in time, you know, that kind of thing. And that's why I studied articulation. Remember I told you I came up with a system because you want to be, if you're not in tune and you don't sound good and you're not in time, you can't play loud. Yeah, you better
Yeah.
And anyway, you know, so that went on like that. But then when I started playing with bands like Thad Jones and I recorded with Duke, man, that was an experience sitting in a room with Harry Carney and those cats, man. Woo, that was out. But so then when I started playing in Bob Mintzer's band, you know, the great artist Bob Mintzer, Michael Brecker introduced me to Bob Mintzer. Saxophone players and trumpet players were always my help, you know. I had developed a style, you know, you could kind of play loudly in a big band if you don't use too hard on articulation. If you're using a kind of a semi-legato or legato articulation, you're playing a little too loud, you don't sound whacked out with the section. You can kind of float in more with the section, you know. So I guess that's how my big band style kind of developed. You had a question about what was the difference playing in Thad Jones and Michelle Camillo and
yeah, just how you conceptualize playing in different bands, or if you do, or if you just play them all the same.
No, you don't play all the same. Some of the big bands you have to use with a faster air. Your air has to go faster. Your mouth cavity has to be small. See, I have a whole technique based on all I think about when I practice is my diaphragm support and where my tongue is. And over the last 30 years, more about aperture. And I think of embouchure as just the shelf that aperture hangs on, you know. You make minuscule changes in pitch, tone. Man, I tell you, when I discovered aperture, that's when Bill Watrous and I really got friendly because we were having a conversation in the back of a bus in Japan, and we kind of liked each other, but we never really tight. But we became tight after this conversation because his whole thing is based on aperture.
Yeah.
His technique is so, you know. And I used to see him walking down the street back in the day, but he'd just be buzzing his mouth all the time. You know, trying to match up back then. And I said, Jesus, why the heck are you doing that? I would think to myself. And then I discovered why, because aperture is the whole game. Aperture, diaphragm is the whole game. How did I get to that?
You were talking about playing in big bands,
right?
Different kinds of big bands.
So, like in a band like Michelle Camillo, you really want to be Man,
Yeah.
like Thad, you kind of more in the float thing. Also, Thad also wrote with more like ninths and stuff like that on the bottom.
Yeah.
Thad wasn't a root 5 guy at the bottom. You know what I mean? But some of the guys are root 5 guys. Like when I'm playing in Bob's band, a lot of times it's doubling bass parts, so it won't get into that extravagant harmonic situation. So you're pretty different when you're playing that than when you're playing, and my recommendation to bass trombone players in big band is take it as far as you want, because if you take it too far, the boss will tell you. The boss will back you off. I was fired from a lot of orchestras, but I haven't been fired from any big bands. And the reason I got fired from orchestras is because I always put my studio scene first and would take off from rehearsals. And after a while, they get a little bent on that. They figure they're hiring you for 5 orchestra jobs a year, so they own your career for those 5 orchestra jobs. And I said, no.
Mind if we hit you with another question?
Yeah, man.
So I see you've got, everybody's always asking about dependent versus independent. And I see you've got an Edwards with dependent Thayer valves behind you, right?
That's correct.
So what sort of fueled that decision?
Well, I mean, I had always played, the double trigger started coming around in the 50s with guys like Louis Van Haney and Edward Kleinhammer and Alan Ostrander, but it never really took off. But then it started taking off in the early 60s. And my first horn was a Holton bass trombone that had an F valve that had a valve on it, a second valve on it that you could pull out and have a single valve instrument. But I always left the double valve on. Double valve horn, and that was dependent. Double valve horns really came into the scene in the mid 60s, and it exponentially grew the instrument. It became totally chromatic. So as long as I have a low B and I'm chromatic, I don't care what I'm playing on. But it's like the dependent. Let me show you what. So this is called the gooseneck, right?
Mm-hmm.
You don't have that.
No.
You don't have that. No independent
Yeah.
valve system has that. This is like turbo. This is a Maserati. This is that really throws the sound out pretty good.
Yeah.
And I have options of color, because if I want a deeper, wider sound, I use both triggers down. If I want to just pump it out, I have that single trigger down. With the Thayer valves, man, the Edwards company, man, they've been so they've been so wonderful to me. They've been so friggin' wonderful to me. They give me all kinds of leeway, and they send me all this equipment. But so I have Thayer valves, right? Yeah. And so with Thayer valves, the air doesn't go in a circle, rotor,
Yeah.
Air goes like an 11 or 15 degree angle through the valve. So in essence, when I'm not playing low notes, I'm playing through an open bass trombone.
Yeah.
You suckers are never playing through an open bass. No, I don't know. The independent stuff is so advanced now. I don't know if it makes any sense at all, but to me, I love moving the slide in the 6th position. You cats don't move past 3. Or do you go to 4? You guys go to 4th position?
No, I use 6 and 7. It just depends on what. It depends on what year it is.
I know. It gives me color options. It gives me. It's just fun to play, man. I don't play any horns that aren't fun to play. I mean, I kind of hold. I mean, like even today. I mean, I was writing and everything, but I practiced a couple hours of scales. Probably tonight, my head is a little spaced out with all of this business now. So I just play scales all day just to keep myself focused. So tonight I'll put a practice unit, play another hour of scales. That kind of thing. Just keeps me focused, keeps me chill. And this virus hates strong lungs.
Yeah. Right.
And give me some more questions and let me feel like I'm saying something.
Okay. Since you're talking about practicing, could you go about how you prepare for, because every time you talk about, there are some virtuosic sections, like as if we haven't passed them, but when we get to the beginning, they're very like, you have to have a lot of facility on the instrument, and it doesn't seem like you even think about those kind of sections anymore. How have you approached practicing the bass trombone and these pieces that you feel so
I play the bass trombone. I practice the bass trombone now the same way I've been doing it for literally 50 years. I mean, I have 4 basic scale patterns that I play, and I only practice major scales. I mean, I'll do the modes when I'm,
Yeah.
But basically, I'm playing major scales all the time, and I always think of it just as breaking a long tone. In fact, for a lot of years, I played out of the Schlossberg trumpet book. They're long tones, and I only played long tones. And my warm-ups are the same exercises as my exercises. And my warm-ups, which are my exercises, are also my repair vehicles. Like there was a period of time I was playing in George Russell's band, playing in the Philharmonic and working up a very difficult piece by a guy named Charles Warren, and I just blew my chops out, and I didn't know how the hell to get him back in. So I just did my warm-up scales very softly, and I pulled it together, you know. And periodically, everyone's going to have to go through. That was in 1984 or 5, and but so I've been practicing that same way. When I'm practicing music of any genre, I don't play scales all day long, you know, otherwise well, I have to tell you something. I'm still, you know, I think the lovely thing about being a lifer, you know what a lifer is, right?
Yeah.
Lifer is just somebody who wants to play this thing till the day they die.
Okay, that's what I figured.
And I'm a lifer. And the lovely thing about being as a lifer is you're constantly trying to grow, you know? So like for this concert I played a concert at the American Trombone Workshop where I played that, what do you call that? That Houdini thing.
Yeah.
I played like for an hour and change, man. I mean, like I was just blowing some of the other companies, and I don't feel it, you know? But what I did for that concert that I've done very rarely is I only warmed up 10 to 15 minutes.
Wow.
And then went out to blow. Because sometimes I get so nervous that I leave the shit in the practice room. You know, so I said, no more of that. You know, the nice thing about being my age is that certain things are kind of solidified now. Like about 10 years ago, I started taking 2 or 3 week vacations once a year. I love my wife, I'll go to Africa, we'll go to India, whatever. And then I bring a mouthpiece with me, and wow, that's impressive.
Yeah, I wanted to show this because this review talks about the record we were just listening to. So this is for And If All Were Dark, which is where we were playing Thekla and Hertz, and I don't think we played the double tier yet.
Well, you sure picked out stuff, huh?
Yeah, well, it's a long review, so I wanted to kind of have the highlights.
Picking out stuff.
Yeah, so I mean, this review talks so much. Like if you look on the bottom left corner, Taylor's virtuosic playing and skillful variations with a variety of mutes give him a wide-ranging palette of sound. And then you have, has restless vision as a soloist and composer.
Well, wait a minute. What's the one on the right side? What is that one?
Taylor's genius.
Isn't that something? I mean, isn't that amazing?
Yeah.
You know what I like about this review? It's not even about the review. It's that it appeared in a real magazine. Yeah, so that's kind of what the review's about. I mean, not even about the words. It's just about we want to get to the general public.
Yeah, that's amazing. You know, what magazine was this off of?
Stereophile magazine. It's a very high end. It's a very high end music journal and equipment journal, music and equipment journal. So I was very happy about that when I saw that. Wow.
Yeah, this is incredible.
Basically, so my articulation and diaphragm thing covers me through all the work. Just, you know, I got to practice, you know, but I never worry about I can't play that lick.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's just a matter of I go slow, I work it up. I mean, some of the Charles Warner pieces I spent 6 months on. One of my students, ex-students, Felix Del Tredici, found online an Arpeggione sonata I did with a piano at a live performance. And that one took me 2 years. I mean, it's a whole piece. We just found the end of it. The whole concert got lost, but we found the end of it. That piece I spent 2 years on before I took it out into the public, you know. Wow. And but I love it, man. A lot of people don't like practicing. I kind of love practicing. You know, it's like I love playing the bass trombone, man. I mean, So when I was at Juilliard, the first 2 years I was a tenor trombone player, but then somebody said, "Hey, look, we can get you a gig." There was a place called the Liederkranz. They had an orchestra, but and I had no money, so you got to play it on bass trombone. So I borrowed a Con 72H from the school. It was leaky and everything. But I kind of dug it. And the guys at school, because since I was the bottom of the totem pole, as soon as I picked up the bass trombone, all of a sudden they said, "Wow, Dave, you wear that? That's pretty good. That's kind of different." And it must have been my tuba playing, you know. So within 6 months, I was like playing like in shows and orchestras. It was an amazing thing that the bass trombone found me.
This is
a violin kind of, you know.
You don't know which concert it was from?
No, it's from some concert. Like to play with time, you know.
Yeah, that's great.
Skip ahead to the middle. Sensitivo, hey?
Yeah.
I love the piano part. It's so corny. And I like to make gradual, like, time changes.
Yeah.
And it is an early romantic piece, you know? And I'll tell you a little bit more about it in a minute.
Mm.
All right, now skip a little bit ahead after the piano solo. It's like a trottish. I don't know if you know what a trottish is. It's like a Hungarian
Yeah, yeah.
Czechoslovakian dance. And I'll tell you how I got to that point.
Ugh.
I gotta tell you, when I heard this back, I kind of was impressed by the soft playing. You know what I mean?
And you just go all over the range of the entire horn. That's like incredible to me.
I practiced all, you know what I mean? It's almost over. See it to the end. Let it run. Let it run.
Mhm.
So the story behind this is that the Arpeggione Sonata, that movement that you just heard, is written for violin. There's no way I was going to be able to play that, and I wanted the gig, so I had to come up with an alternative solution. So I researched Franz Schubert, and I researched him and found out that he's not the clean old boy that we all thought he was. He was, well, we all know he died of a sexually transmitted disease very early on in his life, but he was into everything, guys, girls. He was an alcohol. He was drinking all the time. He hung out in the funked out bars in Vienna on the east side with the Hungarians and the Czechs. He was known to be for his dances and his leader, Schubert leader. So I said, okay, kept researching it. And then the guy who commissioned the Arpeggione Sonata was an opium eater. He was into laudanum and all that. I mean, these cats were funky. Now, Schubert didn't do that. We don't have any documentation of that, of course. So I put all of that together and I said, well, oh man, wait a minute. That's boo bada puppy bada puppy bada puppy bada puppy bada. You know what I'm saying? So I turned it into an Eastern dance based on all of my. I mean, I wanted to do that in the first place, but I never come up with an interpretation that doesn't have some kind of thing that convinces me I'm being truthful to myself. You know, to thine own self be true. That bullshit. No, that was Othello instead of it. From that was Shakespeare. To thine own self be true. You want to bullshit the world? Fine. Just remember you're bullshitting. You know what I mean? Although you're allowed to lie in art, I try to get as much logic and basis for my lies, you know. It's like when I hear bad intonation in improvisers. I mean, the whole thing that they're doing like is the half-step, whole-step relationship, whether it's in a mode or it's in a whatever the hell it is. And if you're not going to play in tune, you kind of like bust it out. What's the point of the half-step, whole-step thing? You know what I mean? It's like, so that's why I put that kind of knowledge and I investigate my classical repertoire the same way I would, you know, like when I'm trying to figure out changes, something like that, man, I find the common tonality, I look for what scales it reach the ba. So I put that same kind of into, oh shit, I'm going on and on. Give me a question so I don't rant.
So multiphonics is something that I know you're really good at. And you said
that's very interesting. I always knew they were there, and of course, we all heard Albert Mangelsdorf and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
I always knew that, but I didn't want to do it like those cats did. And when I'm in the practice room, I'm experimenting all the time. You know, that's what the practice room is for. You shut the door, and you make believe time doesn't exist anymore. I mean, you know, you got to be out in 2 or 3 hours or whatever it is. And then, but in between that, you just let your mind flow. You know Gertrude Stein. You know who Gertrude Stein was? Great writer. She a great writer from the early part of the 20th century. She lived in Paris. She used to invite Picasso over, Stravinsky over. She had whole walls of pictures. Alice B. Toklas was her wife, or at that time they didn't call her lover. And she said the same thing Stravinsky said. If you want to be a genius, you got to be able to think about nothing. And so when you go into your practice rooms, you all have genius. But if you cloud your mind up with all kinds of expectations, you know, if you have expectations, you're sunk. Forget expectations. Nobody owes you nothing. So you go into your practice room and you just experiment. You know, you sit at the keyboard, maybe you figure out the thing. So I just kind of, what was the question?
Asking about multiphonics.
So all right, so I started playing I started fooling around with multiphonics, and I started fooling around with multiphonics with the plunger mute, man, because ever since I heard Tricky Sam and I used to play in Thad's band with Quentin Butter Jackson.
Yeah.
So when you're living with those guys and they're playing plunger mute, man, but I didn't want to do that whole kind of thing with the plunger. So I started doing the multiphonics with the plunger, and it serves two purposes. It made it more vocal, and it also allowed you not to be heard, to hear the voice more than you hear the horn. And it gives it a kind of a surreal sound, you know. And so I just kept practicing like that. And then because I started using it not as a gimmick, I mean, I started using it as if a violinist was using double stops or triple stops. What do I do now?
So we have this piece, which is on your record, Dave Taylor, bass trombone. This is called David
Taylor, right?
David Taylor,
that's correct.
Bass trombone. I'm always getting turned around. And this is Moonrise with Memories, and this is the third movement of that piece.
This was written for me by someone. Yeah, this was written by a guy named Frederick Jeffsky, who's becoming even more famous now. He's still alive. He's living in London, but he asked me what kind of a piece do I want, and he knew my background.
Mhm.
And I also wanted a piece for unspecified instruments, 6 unspecified instruments. So sometimes I play it with tuned cowbells, sometimes I play it with old clarinets, sometimes I play it with mixed instruments. I even played it with jazz band every now and then. I hate to say that word, but big band. So this one, though, I did with dulcimer, clarinet, E flat, trumpet and mute, violin, and I can't remember what else. Okay, so that last the ending is "Did somebody die?" This the whole piece is based on a Langston Hughes poem.
Mhm.
Oh, what a grand time was the war! What a grand time was the war! My oh my, my oh my, my! What a grand time! And the kick at the very end. What a grand time was the war! Did somebody die? You know, that kind of thing. So that's the song in the middle movement. You should show them the Eric Ewazen thing, because Eric Ewazen came up, and everybody has an impression of Eric Ewazen that I'd like to bust right now.
All right, for sure. Yeah, that's where I was gonna go next. I'm excited.
Oh, okay. All right.
I just wanted to say before I go that thank you so much for coming on.
Oh, I'm honored,
Just
man.
it's been a blast having you on, and
Thank you.
know, really
I'm honored to
seriously.
be here, man. Both you and Gina doing a great service for the community.
Let's hear some Ewazen.
I mean, how much of this do you want to play?
Of course.
Is there any sections in this in particular that you want to play?
I don't care. Just plunk it down somewhere. Go further in.
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
So you said that you overdubbed this, right?
Yeah. If you make it a little lower, we could talk while it's going on. John Rojak, a bass trombone player who plays the American Brass Quartet, was taking lessons with me back in the day, and I asked him if he knew any young composers that I could found, and he said, "Yeah, well, there's this fellowship student Eric Ewazen," and so I went and met Eric, and I heard his reel. He played me like a demo reel, and I heard something he wrote for a bunch of Kelly, and they said, "Give me something like that." So he wrote this piece for me, and we overdubbed it 9 times. And
Wow.
the movie, though, the movie You know, the guy who runs the Red Bull drink company has his headquarters in Salzburg. And he has a hangar there called Hangar 7. That's where Karl-Heinz Stockhausen premieres his helicopter pieces and stuff like that. And then he invited me to improvise in his airplane hangar. We had Maserati, Lamborghinis, Ferraris, DC-9s, F-16s, helicopters and I would walk around improvising. And they made this movie in the basement of his Hangar 7 of me, and then superposed other things. And I wanted to reuse the movie. They played this movie against the background of a scrim at sunset on the airplane hangar. It was magnificent. And I just walked around improvising. But I wanted to utilize the movie again, so I got permission and I put it to this.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah. And but we can get off that now.
Well, this is the first thing that we're doing that has improvising on. Do you want to talk about some of the other pieces that you did? Because one of the ones that I wanted to talk about.
But you pick the ones, and I'll just go along with what you want to do.
All right, cool. So at the beginning, we talked about your, what is it? David Taylor plays Dave Taylor? Or is it Dave Taylor?
Plays David Taylor.
Dave Taylor plays David Taylor.
I am going to beat that into you.
I don't remember. Dave Taylor plays David Taylor.
That's okay. Too.
Right. All right. So one of the pieces that you had, because we talked about also you were playing with Thad, you were playing with you had experience playing in the Ellington band, right. And one of these pieces in that.
I spent 5 years with Gil Evans. That was the heavy time. Right.
Yeah, this track that I'm about to play, so it's from Dave Taylor plays David Taylor, and it's I believe it's fifth track. It's the blues. It's incredible because it shows.
Did you hear it as a blues?
Parts of it, yeah. Because it started off, if you don't know the title, if you don't know what you're about to listen to, it starts off really open. The sound and the presence and the spirit of Ellington, I felt like was in this.
Nice.
I hear the blues form over this.
Yeah, that's the whole point, right? It's really 12 bars, 12 bars, 12 bars, 12 bars, 12 bars. You have to remember, this is a bipolar personality at the end of his win. In this setting, I mean, it stands up on its own, but in this setting.
Yeah.
But in the open section, that's strictly Beatles.
Mm. This one, as well as the track Mahalia from Atomic Bomb Blues, I felt like both had a lot of the Ellington spirit behind it.
Well, I mean, Ellington and Gil are my favorite guys. I have a prepared piano because I wanted to sound like Honky Tonk. Why am I yelling?
You're yelling?
I don't know. It feels like I'm yelling.
No. So I'm going to fast forward a little bit on this track right here.
Just manic. I'm hearing manic.
So I'm going to pause this here because I want to show a different, this is the Mahalia track.
Right. And that was one of the tunes we did on that New Orleans Suite record. Puppy, 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 That's a great Jack Walrath. I mean, you know, it's interesting. Can I talk about this?
Yeah.
You know, we're so, at this point now with our education, we're so perfection oriented that oftentimes we'll put out really, really perfect records, and so what, you know?
Mm-hmm.
This record was a live performance I did in 1992 at a place called the Knitting Factory. And it's my most flawed record, but I love it. My wife and I love it. And I try to shop it around. And before 2000, nobody wanted it because I deal with racial problems, women rights problems, and things like that on it. So nobody wanted to touch it at that time. I finally put this out by myself, and I don't give it to people because I do to musicians.
Mm-hmm.
Because musicians understand what we're going for. This thing just got a review that knocked my, I mean, I've been hiding this record. This record wasn't even on my website until today because I didn't, it's on my heart, but I didn't think anybody would like it. You know what I mean? It's like, and then all of a sudden, Rufus Reed, we play in this band, you know, so Rufus Reed got a hold of me and said, "Hey man, did you see this review?" And so out of the blue, you know, you never know, man. You know, you never know what's good or not. You know, I mean, I don't even know still if it's good or not, but it just goes to show you, you know. Thad Jones once told me years ago, because I was very insecure when I mentioned it to you when I was in his band, and guys would come up to me and say, "Hey man, you know, you sound great," and blah blah blah, and I would tell them, "No, I don't. I really don't. I did." And he came up to me once after a while. He said, "Dugga," he called everybody Dugga. Dugga, it's not the artist's right to burst someone's bubble when they think you played well. He didn't use the word "you shouldn't do it." He said it's not our right to judge our performances after a performance. And I always remembered that, but I still can't believe it. But you know what I mean? This took me by surprise, man. This took me by surprise. I mean, I don't believe a word of it, of course, but no, I don't. I mean, because it's just so exaggerated that he heard the record, and he heard the record as contemporary music. You know what I mean? He understood what I was trying to go back and forth between. I do a lot of Mingus on this and Gershwin and stuff. And I can only tell you that I don't, you know, if you believe the good ones, you got to believe the bad ones. You can't believe these things, but they're good for business.
Yeah, that's true.
They're good for business. And we have to think, you know what, one of the reasons I like putting up that Schubert thing, because that's almost like Bordoni Rochoux exercises on acid. That, you know, that thing that you heard me play that.
Yeah.
And when I talk to trombone players, you know, I got to remind them we ain't in the Bordoni business. You know what I mean? Meaning that, hey man, let's get out of here. Let's just play some music and take your chance. And I really took a chance on this, putting out this live concert, because it's really flawed and stuff. But you want to play something by William Grant Still? That was one of the things that when you asked me what I want to play, I chose that. And here I'm singing kind of like a Jewish rabbi. William Grant Still wrote this, and his second wife, Verna Arvey, who was Jewish. William is African-American. His second wife was Jewish. And she wrote this thing. It was written for a female chorus. It's called Wailing Woman. And it's about, I understood, you'll hear the lyrics. It's about, they rejected him because his skin was black. I understood because my nose was hooked and blah, blah, blah. I got into this crazy stuff. And I think people didn't want to buy it at that time but I had to put this on the record, man. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
William Grant Still was a black composer in the classical through composed tradition. And he was totally shunned by the community, really shunned. In fact, there was an opera competition in Paris. And at that time, they loaded up all these reels of American composers, and somehow his opera got lost. I overdubbed the voice on this. On this record, I overdubbed a voice, and on the opera, I wrote an opera about Sappho, the Greek woman Sappho, and Catullus, a Roman poet, having a lover's quarrel. So my daughter and I overdubbed that.
All right, here we go.
Wailing Woman, music by William Grant Still, poem by Verna Arvey. He said they shunned him because his skin was black. Underneath I felt a kin. Because my nose was hooked, my folk despised.
My band was really a great band. My octet. I don't know if you know the bassist Essiet. Yeah, great bassist. Phil Haynes on drums. Steve Wilson, Patience Higgins, Andy Laster, saxophones, doubling on all the clarinets and blah blah blah, and two fantastic trumpet players, Paul Smoker, now deceased, from the Free Scene, and Herb Robinson. So it was really an expressive group, and I go for expression first, man. You know, it's like it's really weird how, and I don't care what genre it's, as long as it says something, man. You know, and I don't feel like a bass trombone player. You know, it just we happen to be playing the bass trombone. We want to talk about two valves, talk about two valves. You want to talk about the lead pipes, talk about lead. I'm a geek with that stuff, but it's just a timbre, man. You know, just a timbre. And I happen to think that trumpets have more leeway in the sound they can get. People accept trumpet sounds from A to Z. Trombones are getting there. Bass trombones, we're still locked into, wow, what a big sound, what a, you know what I mean? We're still locked up in that crap. And I kind of don't pay it. I try not to too much mind. Now, this gig was at the Knitting Factory, and they wouldn't let me do a whole show there. They only give you one set. So what I did was I talked them into starting the set real early. So I started the set at 6 o'clock. And went to 7:30, 8 o'clock when the next guy came in, you know, and I do those things. Like with the Pew Taylor project, that was done, I don't know when that was done. It was done in the 80s. At that time, there was a producer named Tom Jung, very, very advanced engineer and producer. I met him in the commercial scene, and I knew he had a record label, DMP, and I wanted to be on that record label. And I was going to show him my stuff, and he broke his leg, and he was hospitalized in Minneapolis. So I took my thing and I flew to Minneapolis and I hit him up in his hospital room with the broken leg. So he was kind of convinced to do this. And then Jim Pugh and I did this thing together. Jim Pugh arranged that Wailing Woman you just heard. What do you want to do now, kid?
Can you elaborate a little bit more on why you don't see classical music and jazz as different, and why you don't think of yourself as playing bass trombone? Can you just talk about what you mean by that?
Yeah. Well, when I was a kid, I was the first guy in my family to graduate from high school. My mom was a stay-at-home mom. My dad was a laborer. We never had a record player in the house until I was like 16, so I had no background in jazz or any of that stuff. The only music I knew was old-time movies, so you know I loved Louis Armstrong. Old-time movies, gangster movies, and stuff like that, and R&B radio. Rock and roll radio. When I went to Juilliard, it mainly was because I didn't know what else to do with my life. My brother was a cab driver, so I guess I could have been a cab driver, or I like trucks. I like semis, so I could have been a semi. I didn't want to do that, so I went to music school instead. I got into Manhattan and Juilliard, and I auditioned on the Haydn Trumpet Concerto, second movement. It's a slow movement. So nobody knew I couldn't read or anything, really. They only knew I couldn't read when they put the sight reading part in front of me, but that's only ancillary, you know, that kind of thing. So I got in. But because I grew up with the radio, you know, back in the old days, you young people don't know about tuners, but there was a tuner on a radio. And really all you had to do was dial the tuner to the left or right. You would hit different kinds of music. R&B would be here, rock and roll would be here, jazz would be here, classical would be there, and you go like that. And the other thing too is that when I went to Juilliard and I finally was able to get into the theory class, they had a thing called Literature and Materials of Music, L&M. I think it went 1, 2, 3, 4 or 1, 2, 3. And basically it was the study of Bach. And Bach chorales a 4-part harmony. And that always reminded me of New Orleans for some reason, you know, and the harmony was kind of basic. You go to 6 chord. Bach wrote in the French style, the German style, the Italian style. And you got to remember, you know, now we jump on an airplane and we're there in 5 minutes, you know, jump on a bullet train. But back in the day, that was like 10 days on a horseback. So those are pretty remote styles. And he was able to control all these things as styles. So I just translated that to those couple of things. I just translated that. And because of my approach to the instrument wasn't really doodle tongue or non-doodle tongue, and my sound, I always felt that the integrity of the instrument came first. So I put the same sound wherever I went. So it was just natural for me not to fall. And it wasn't dignified to think of jazz and classical music in separate terms. I believe in the dignity of all of that stuff, you know? That's one of the reasons I couldn't play in a big band. I couldn't join a regular big band, and I couldn't join an orchestra. I didn't want any part of either of that. I think, I'm not 100% sure, but I didn't want any part of any of that. Gil Evans' band was the band I stayed, and Mincer, although we're not playing that much now. So I guess Gil Evans' band was the steady band I played in the most for 5 years. And he ruined my life, Gil. I mean, after playing with Gil Evans, man, you never want to go back. I used to be able to go on the road with a big band and come back and fit right back into the scene. Mm-hmm. But right around that time I was playing with Gil Evans, man, when you get a taste of that, you have to go your own route. That kind of, he told me a very interesting story. When Miles Evans' 21st birthday, we were in Venice, and we were in a fancy restaurant, and we were celebrating his birthday. And I didn't get along with the band's manager at that time. He was an English guy, and he happened to pass my table and accidentally knocked over a glass of water on me. So I kind of knocked over a glass of water on him. Then he knocked, and I finally just took a picture and sprayed it. And the band got me out of the restaurant real fast because it hit the frescoes, whatever the hell I got on the wall. And I was amazed. Gil Evans came running after me. He says, Dave, wait up, because he was bored too. Dave, wait up. And we started walking around Venice together. And he laid this on me, man. He said, Duke Ellington told him, and he told me that if you leave yourself open, you never know who's going to come along and pull your coat left. And I guess that's my philosophy. It's like, if you can leave yourself open, you never know what the hell's going to come along, and most likely it'd be good. Like you guys now with this whole Corona business, you're going through an amazing historic moment, game-changing for your careers. And this is going to be very interesting to see. You know, the highest form of intelligence is the ability to adapt. So now we're going to see who's going to adapt and who's not going to adapt. I know with my career, I never really protected my flanks. You know, like some people, they go like this. You know, like if you think of an airplane, right? They're flying an airplane, and you can see the wings on either side. So you can kind of protect the left, you can protect the right. You know what I mean? You get a good gig, you want to politically protect yourself. I always thought of myself as a jet. You know, with a jet, the wings are behind you like this.
Mm.
So I don't protect. I can't see. I do some protection, but not really, man. I just want to go straight ahead. And I found that every 10 years or so, my career flattened out and I had to reinvent my career. And I'm kind of doing that right now. I'm reinventing my career.
Can you talk a little bit more about that?
What do you mean? What
Like
I say?
the corona stuff happening, us having to
Look,
adapt.
who you going to play with?
Mm-hmm.
It's going to come back. It's going to come back. You know, it's going to take a long time till everybody's sitting next to each other on top of each other. That's going to take a long time. But to see how you got, you know, when the Vietnam War came around, I had an option, man. I became a school teacher for a year in a very bad neighborhood. So the Army gave you a deferment. Some of the guys, Vietnam was a very rough time here in the States, man. It was like, terrible, you know. I didn't want to go under any circumstance. Some guys wanted me to join the Marine Band. They would get me in the Marine Band, but that was a 5-year hitch. You know what I mean? You had to be in there for 5 years. And I didn't want to take a chance on that because it would have destroyed my prime networking time, like what you're in right now.
Mm-hmm.
Prime networking time, and people your age group. So I didn't want to. So I took a chance on teaching for a year or two, and in the middle school, and I think it was the right decision because I stayed here and I networked while I was teaching. I mean, I was working day and night. I still always work day and night. So you guys are going to have to figure out a way to keep your networking going. And you're going to have to figure out a way to keep your practicing going. Because for what I'm seeing for myself, I mean, I've been shut up in the house for 3 weeks now. I'm in an older age group, so I don't want to fuck around with taking a chance, you know. So I'll probably be hit. But I'm seeing even for myself, you could fall into some kind of lethargy. So I'm curious to see how your age group negotiates their way through this. And believe me, this is going to be, it's going to be over, but you can't waste a second. You cannot waste a second. I mean, you know, like art doesn't wait for anybody. Art just moves on. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And you know what? It doesn't matter if your art is good or bad, as long as you're, I used to be really, really competitive. Thankfully, you know me as a sweet old man, but I wasn't always a sweet old man. You know? I never tried to get a gig from somebody, from another player. That one I never did, but whenever a gig was offered, I was there and I was prepared. I'm a real big believer in show up on time, be prepared, and be ready to adapt.
Mm-hmm.
Really big on that. And so I always warmed up. You'll be surprised people don't warm up, man. I always warmed up. I was always ready for the gig. And I have a pretty good track record. You know, nobody's 100%. I mean, I screwed up plenty. That's another thing, too. I mean, I don't know how are you guys going to fail. You guys have to fail because if you don't fail, you're not going to be able to see your parameters. How do you know how far you're going to go unless you go to the edge?
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? So I always let myself go to the edge. How do we get into this? Oh, yeah. So now you're going to have to find a new edge.
Mm-hmm.
You guys are going to have to find a new edge now and be ready for it when it comes back. It will come back. It's going to come back differently, but you want to make sure you're on the bandstand when it comes back. So what are you doing for that?
Me personally?
Yeah,
Or are you saying in general?
In general. Give me another question. Forget that.
Okay. We were talking about the distinction between jazz and classical and how you don't consider there is one.
No, you got to remember, I'm not a great jazz player. I'm not a great classical player. I'm kind of like floating around in there. And maybe in hindsight, somebody will say, wow, that guy sounded good. That's where I'm at. You know what I mean? I'm not a jazz player to the jazz players. I'm not a classical player to the classical players.
How does that make you feel? That's just me. I'm curious.
It makes me feel lousy a lot. I have an ego, but it wasn't worth giving up. It wasn't worth giving up who I am. You know what you need? You know what everybody needs? Everybody needs a good partner. That was one of the luckiest things in my life. I met Ronnie about 5 years into my career. I already had my own Broadway show when I was at Juilliard. At that time, we were told not to do Broadway shows, but I never listened to what anybody told me. But then a couple of years after that, either was my arrogance or the fact that I changed up my technique. I can't tell which one, or maybe both. I lost every job I had, every friggin' one. My old lady went back to teaching, and she said she didn't want me. She just wanted me in the house practicing. because she didn't want me to have to go out and kiss anybody's butt for a job.
Wow.
When you get married or when you live with somebody, that's the person you want to live with.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I always brought home bread for the table. That was my preoccupation when I was your age, because I had a kid when I was 24, man. So, man, I don't know. Give me a question.
Can you talk about, I mean, everybody's aware. People know who Dave Taylor is. Classical bass trombonist, jazz bass trombonist alike. Everybody knows who you are. And we know things that you've celebrated. And so can you talk about some other examples of these you really felt like you were failing?
I never really felt secure in any session, any place I was, until maybe 20 years ago. I was always I was very insecure, man. Until the time I was 40, man, I didn't talk much on gigs. Contractors would say, say something, that kind of thing, I didn't talk very much, and then I kind of came out of my shell, and I speak too much. I was lucky. The group of guys I hung out with, they didn't understand what I was doing. I'm talking about guys like Lou Soloff, John Faddis, Alan Rubin, Randy Brecker. That was my group, Michael Brecker, Ronnie Cuber, Sanborn, George Young, all these guys. These were my boys, They never understood what I was doing, but they loved it that I was doing it. That's the kind of group you want to hang out with. I just lucked into those situations, man. I mean, maybe it was easier for my generation. I don't know. But every generation has its own moments. This is your generation's moment, kid. This is, I've never seen anything like this. I thought it was rough. When I told you I went to Europe and I recorded that record in one night. I'll never forget going to Newark Airport. This was 2 weeks after 9/11, having to go in between the tanks and the soldiers to get to the boarding gate and shit. But this is hilarious, man, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, and so I've seen people saying like we're living through like a big moment in history. Did you know when you were living through big moments in history, even within your own career? No,
not even 9/11. I mean, of course I knew 9/11 was a big moment, but not like this, where I can't go outside. Well, I don't go outside anyhow. For me, this isn't that big a deal because I'm in the house anyhow.
Yeah.
I'm in the house anyhow. I'm a practicer, man. I practice all day, And then now that I'm writing for the last 10 years, I've been writing all the time, and I love being with my woman. And then what we do now, she turns on these women. They have these exercise tapes and stuff.
Oh, yeah.
So I stand in front of these pretty women in tight pants exercising.
I'm making my roommate do the same with me.
So that's kind of fun. I mean, but I worry about people who are less fortunate than myself. This is a nightmare, man.
Yeah. I was thinking about how, for me at least, it feels, because I'm also pretty introverted. I stay inside unless I have like a show to go out to. Yeah. I'm realizing maybe I want to change that after all of this, but this is home for me. This feeling of being at home and having the time really feels like a blessing.
You have a goal? You have a goal? Where do you see yourself in 5 years? And has that changed since this?
Yes, a lot. I have.
Where did you see yourself in 5 years before this went down?
Well, I mean, it's changed a little bit. I really wanted to travel with my group, with my quintet. I wanted to travel with my nonette a lot. And
yeah, you told me you have a whole book and a half of that, man.
Yeah, I mean, I love writing. So, right. And actually when we did that gig with Rufus Reid, just like maybe a month or two before that, I really started thinking about how I wanted to play with opening up my stuff, maybe thinking about things more through compose. So it was like really beautiful timing to do that show, play all his music, and then you gave me that CD, and it was just...
What made you want to go to through compose?
I feel like I just felt like it was time, I do a lot of this. I lost my hard drive a couple years ago, and I had a bunch of charts, and they were very it's like standards and stuff like that. And I've always wanted to work on through compose stuff, and I just never had the confidence. And I think one day I was just like, I don't care. Like, even if it comes out bad, I'm going to try at least, because then if I write 10 bad things, maybe one of the things is okay at least.
That's my
philosophy. And then I have one okay thing.
So now how did that change?
Well, so a lot of the stuff had planned on, I had like little goals set up, like I had to put together an EPK for my group, and I had to do performance and stuff to set up for the touring, because when you go touring, you need this stuff. You need like recordings of the band, and you need like bio for the members, and you need kind of like an established, I wanted to get like a regular playing gig with the nonette, and I had like goals set up until that, but everything just stopped. All the clubs are closed. We don't even know when they're going to start again. So it's almost like I'm writing like as if I still intend to do the shows, but the actual recordings won't be there, and physical material that I need to submit to get the gigs isn't going to be there.
I didn't think your age group carried around physical material.
Well, not physical like CDs, an EPK, you know, like the press kit is going to have all those materials. And I'm not going to be able to get live video of the band playing if there's no live show of the band playing. So it's changed in that sense. I don't know if my 5-year plan has changed, but the plan I had this 1 year leading into that 5 years has changed a lot. So now I'm trying to think of like how we're doing some virtual recordings and stuff like that. And I'm writing every week. I try to write a piece, whether it comes out crap or not. I'm going to write it, you know, at least I'll have something. It informs something I write later. Trying to just do that and trying to practice the tunes in a way that I haven't had a chance to do. I don't think ever in my...
Anybody bother you in your apartment when you practice? I mean, no.
No, I'm very like, my landlord is always telling me, open the window so we can hear you. I'm like, I don't want to hear my tuba long tones.
That's wonderful. No, that's a lucky break. I feel that way here too. I could practice here all the time. How do we proceed from here? But I just want maybe play something that's impressive for the people so I could play the trombone.
Okay, all right. Let me look. I don't think me and you have the same idea of what's impressive or not, because when I see stuff and to me it's like crazy impressive.
Give me some stuff you have and give me a dealer's choice.
We have shtick.
Do shtick. You know why? Because I love stand-up. I totally love stand-up, and Lenny Bruce to me. So a composer friend of mine wrote a piece for me called Shtick. His name is David Schiff. He uses. You're supposed to issue a disclaimer here.
Yes, that's right. Be warned. There's some explicit material.
Lenny Bruce had a routine that I think one of the routines that threw him in jail, and it was to come. To is a preposition. Come is a verb. And the whole piece is based on me doing Lenny Bruce's to come. That's like a septet, something like that. I played this at a very important concert with Steve Reich and all these guys, and WNYC Radio broadcasted, but they issued a disclaimer. So that's why maybe I thought you should issue the disclaimer. Mm-hmm. But here it is, and then maybe we can talk a second about it, and we can kiss everybody goodnight.
Okay, here we go. This is Shtick from Past
This is the end of the trumpet solo before my solo? Right.
Yep, okay. Got it queued up for you.
I can't come. Don't ask me. It's been like a big drum solo, folks. Don't ask me. I can't come because you don't love me. I love you, but I just can't come when I'm loaded. I shouldn't ball and juice at the same time because you don't love me. All right, all right.
If anyone in this room finds that verb intransitive, obscene, vile, vulgar, if it's really a hang-up to hear it, and you think I'm the rankest for saying it, you probably can't come.
You got to remember, I'm a very dignified man, but every now and then I like a good joke. What do you make of that?
Kind of demands your attention. Listen to what's happening. I loved that ending. I would like listen to the whole track again just to get to that ending.
I'm very fortunate that geniuses don't mind me hanging around. So I get like great music from guys. I think the reason is that, I don't know what the reason is. I'm very lucky. I was in the right place at the right time. That's what I want to tell you guys too. This is the right place. You know that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because it's the place now. So this is the right place. Now you have to figure out how to develop it. I empathize with you guys. Everything is going to be okay. It's going to be a new okay. Things will be different. And the most intelligent of you will adapt, because that's what intelligence is, the ability to adapt. Hey, you know what? Putting up with my crap, you're lovely. I always dug you, and now I know why.
Well, I have one last question to tie this up before we end that I'm also curious about, and Eric asked. He wants to know what's the why you distinguish between David Taylor and Dave Taylor.
It was just funny, and I didn't want to take myself seriously. I mean, I wrote this. The record is through composed. I mean, a couple of improvisatory spots, but I really wrote it as a through composed CD, concerto style, because each one of these pieces is a concertina. One of them is with string orchestra, one of them with a big band, a big wind orchestra. But I wanted to make the record on my own. I couldn't afford to hire those groups, so I put them in little groups. And I just don't want to take myself serious. Once you start taking yourself seriously, man, it's over. You know, it's all a game. Dave Taylor plays the music of, you know, that kind of crap. I'm sitting in the middle of the room. Yeah, don't want to take yourself too seriously. It's all fun. Oh, Anton Chekhov, the great sleigh writer. I mean, this guy is a great. Give me a second. I'm going to find this.
Great.
Do silly things. Foolishness is a great deal more vital and healthy than our straining and striving after a meaningful life.
Mm-hmm.
Do silly things. Foolishness is a great deal more vital and healthy than our straining and striving after a meaningful life. So I guess that's what and it took me a long time to realize that, man, but that's what it's about. I mean, Anton Chekhov, you got to check him out. Three Sisters, The Seagull, and extremely. Also, you guys got to go start going to art museums, because there's harmony and melody in color, in painting. Put restrictions on yourselves. A novelist has restrictions. Composers, when they're doing a song form, doing a blues form, doing a sonata allegro form, symphonic form, there's restrictions. A painter, he's in his frame. So look for the people who paint outside the frame. There's a guy named Frank Stella, Stella, now deceased. He used to make frames of different shapes to go along with his paintings. Goes outside that. Those are the cats. I think we're too inhibited in our education. I think the reason I was able to succeed was I learned if I have succeeded, I learned oh shit, I'm getting so fucking pompous. All right, give me a break. I'll do this. I learned the Ivory Tower handbook, and I learned the street handbook. So I know how to have 1 foot in heaven, maybe, and 1 foot in the gutter. Yeah, man. Let's end it on that.
Yeah,
I love you for having me here, man. Really,
Thank you so much for doing this with us.
Oh, man. I'm stuck in the house anyway, right?
Right. So this is the place to be, 8vbebop on Wednesdays, to hear stories like yours. Thank you so much for your time. And thanks to everybody for watching. We've had a lot of, everybody commenting, watching. We appreciate you. This is awesome.
What are the best?
Everybody loves bass trombone.
What is the best comments and what are the worst comments?
The worst comment is LOL. No, I'm just kidding. I don't know what the worst comments are, but they're really good. A lot of the questions we asked were from the comments today.
Oh,
so
okay.
Thank you
Good,
guys
good,
for
okay.
asking live. That's awesome. We appreciate that.
All
Thank
right.
you,
And
Mr. Taylor.
I hope we all meet each other somewhere down the line.
Mm-hmm. I hope so too. Next week, we're going to be doing it at the same time, and the lovely Jennifer Wharton will be joining us. So if you liked it this week, next week we have Jennifer Wharton.
Well,
So
she has a sense of humor.
she does have the sense of humor.
She has a sense of humor.
Yeah.
All right, kid. Goodbye.
All right. Bye, guys.